The transmission crackled through the void, carrying desperation across 14 light-years of empty space. Admiral Kane stood before the holographic display in the command center of Luna Station, watching the alien figure materialize in flickering, blue light. The creature before them bore the unmistakable marks of suffering, torn flesh, exhausted eyes, and trembling limbs that spoke of endless flight from something terrible. "People of Earth," the being began, its voice carrying through, the universal translator with haunting clarity. "My name is Vel, and I represent the last free colony of the Arcean Republic. We have watched your species from afar, studied your history, your wars, your capacity for both creation and destruction. We come to you now, not as conquerors or traitors, but as the desperate seeking salvation." Kane exchanged glances with Colonel Martinez, who had fought in the Martian Liberation Wars, and Commander Thompson, a veteran of the asteroid mining conflicts. These were humans who understood war, who had seen the worst of what their own species could inflict upon itself. Yet something in the alien's plea struck deeper than politics or territory. Vel continued, his voice growing stronger despite his obvious wounds. "The Dominion sweeps across our sector like a plague of metal and fire. They do not seek resources or territory. They seek the complete erasure of all thinking life that does not bow to their singular will. 17 civilizations have fallen in the past solar cycle. We are the 18th. The hologram flickered, showing images that made even the battle-hardened humans step back. Entire worlds reduced to smoldering husks, cities that had stood for millennia turned to glass, and refugees fleeing in vessels that barely held together. But it was not the destruction that moved them. It was the faces of the survivors, the children clinging to parents, the elderly helped along by the young, the wounded carrying the wounded. "We know your reputation," Vel said, and something like hope entered his voice. "We know you are a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. We know you fight amongst yourselves with a fervor that frightens older races. But we also know that when threatened, when pushed beyond all reason, humans become something that makes even the Dominion hesitate." General Brooks, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. He bore scars from the Titan Rebellion, where human fought human in the methane storms of Saturn's largest moon. "What exactly are you asking of us?" "We ask for the impossible," Vel replied without hesitation. "We ask you to stand against an enemy that has never known defeat, that has turned conquest into an art form perfected over millennia. We ask you to risk everything for people you have never met, for worlds you have never seen, for a cause that offers no reward, save the knowledge that you prevented the extinction of thinking life itself." The room fell silent, save for the hum of the station's life support systems. Kane found himself thinking of his daughter, safe in the orbital cities around Earth, learning to paint in zero gravity. Martinez thought of the Marines under his command, young men and women who had signed up to protect human colonies, not alien civilizations. Thompson considered the logistics, supply lines stretching across impossible distances, weapons untested. Against alien technology, tactics developed for human opponents. "Show us their strength," Kane said finally. The hologram shifted, displaying the Dominion fleet in all its terrible glory. Ships the size of cities, bristling with weapons that could crack planets, moving with a coordination that spoke of centuries of tactical evolution. The numbers alone were staggering. Thousands of vessels where humanity could field hundreds. "They are machines," Vel explained, "but not in the way you might think. They were once organic, perhaps, but chose to surrender flesh for steel, emotion, for efficiency, individual thought for collective purpose. They do not tire, do not fear, do not question orders. They are, in every measurable way, the perfect military force." Colonel Martinez laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Perfect soldiers, no imagination, no adaptation, no ability to do something completely insane just because it might work. He looked around the room. They've never fought humans, have they? No, Vel admitted. Your species is considered too primitive to warrant attention. The Dominion believes you would fall within days of first contact. Days, General Brooks repeated, tasting the word. Not hours or minutes. Days. They respect us enough to think we might last days. Something had changed in the room's atmosphere. Kane could feel it, the subtle shift that occurred when humans stopped calculating odds and started calculating revenge. It was the same feeling that had driven their ancestors to charge machine gun nests with bayonets, to fly fighter planes into enemy carriers, to stand alone against impossible odds, simply because surrender was not an option. What assets can you provide? Kane asked. Star charts, tactical data on Dominion forces, and the coordinates of their forward staging areas. We can also provide you with our few remaining ships, though they are damaged and their crews exhausted. We don't need your ships, Thompson said quietly. We need to know where they are. Within hours, emergency sessions convened across Earth's governing bodies. The debate was fierce, but brief. Some argued for isolation, for building defenses, and hoping the Dominion would never turn their attention to humanity. Others called for negotiation, for finding some accommodation with this new power. But the warriors knew better. The veterans of human wars understood what their politicians could not, that there are times when the only choice is to fight, regardless of odds, regardless of cost, regardless of whether victory was even possible. The Dominion had made a fundamental error in their calculations. They had assumed that logical beings would choose survival over principle, that rational creatures would surrender rather than face extinction. They had never encountered the particular madness that made humans charge uphill into artillery fire, that made them hold positions until the last bullet was fired, that made them choose to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. The mobilization began immediately. Every shipyard from Earth to the outer colonies received rush orders. Every military academy graduated its cadets early. Every veteran who could still hold a weapon was called back to service. The message went out through every human settlement, every station, every colony ship still traveling between the stars. Admiral Kane stood once more before the communication array, this time sending a message back to Vel. The alien appeared on screen, hope and fear warring in his expression. We cannot promise you victory, Kane said simply. We cannot promise that we will save your people or that we will survive what is coming. But we can promise you this: the Dominion will learn what it means to fight a species that considers death preferable to dishonor. They will learn what it means to face warriors who fight not for territory or resources, but for the simple right to exist as free beings. When the histories are written, whether by your people or theirs, they will remember that humanity answered the call. They will remember that when the darkness came for the light, we stood in its path and refused to move. The transmission ended, but across human space, the engines of war began to turn.